Greetings, lovers of lore! Thank you for joining me for the third installment of the Brothers War lore series. In the last installment, we left off with the sound of many metallic footsteps slamming into the ground. Our story continues with the sound of those footsteps getting louder as they grow closer. And Takasia noticed with dismay that an unseen door had opened, and 6 fully functional Suchis lumbered into the room with surprising speed. Takasia turned to run and frantically motioned for Urza and Mishra to come with her. Instead, Urza actually took a step forwards, holding his half of the broken power stone aloft. "I believe I can stop them." As he said this, the stone in his hand grew bright. A crimson ray burst forth from the gem, and all 6 of the horrific metal monstrosities were engulfed by the blast of energy, and for one blissful moment, they paused. That moment ended, and the Suchis surged forwards. They were moving even faster now. Mishra shot Urza an accusatory glance. "You've just made them stronger!" "Run!" Urza bellowed in reply. Mishra moved to use his stone in the same way, but Urza shoved him. "That won't work. Don't waste time. Move!" Mishra reluctantly relented, and the 2 brothers dashed off after Takasia. Up the stairs they ran, the Suchis still in hot pursuit. The constructs, though, had difficulty managing the stairs, which slowed them. Unfortunately, that speed advantage was quickly being cancelled out by Takasia. Her aged body was not ready for a mad stair dash, and it had not taken very long before she required assistance, leaning heavily on Urza. They reached the top of the stairs heaving for breath, the Suchi not too far behind them. Urza cast about for something to block the stairway, so he was unable to stop Mishra from raising his stone. "My turn!" A sickly green energy came out in a curved wave and flowed towards the oncoming Suchi. It settled down on the first construct. The effect was immediate and noticeable. The Suchi slowed, then stopped for a moment. This caused the other Suchi behind it to stumble into it, leading to all of them falling backwards down the stairs. This was only a temporary reprieve, as all but one of the Suchis righted themselves and turned back towards the brothers. Urza was grim. "I was right. It didn't work." "Worked better than your attempt," Mishra spat back. Takasia wheezed. "Flee now. Argue later." The brothers looked at each other, nodded, and together onwards the 3 ran. As they headed back towards the cave entrance, a half-finished Suchi leapt at them from an alcove. Urza guarded Takasia, while Mishra let another blast flow from his stone. The effect was remarkable. The construct was blown apart in a flash of emerald brilliance. Urza raised his eyebrows, and Mishra shot him a triumphant smile, but they did not waste any more time. The march of the Suchi beat a steady rhythm somewhere behind them in the distance. Ahead of them beckoned the welcoming safety of the cave entrance. Abruptly, Urza stopped moving forwards and motioned for Mishra and Takasia to stop as well. The reason became evident as a giant shadow moved on the sand just outside the cave's entrance. Mishra cursed. The rock was still out there waiting for them. Urza peeked out of the cave's entrance and spotted the rock perched nearby. No getting around it. Mishra crept up with his stone held out, Urza watching expectantly. A wave of green energy crashed into the rock. It let out an indignant bellow as it jumped into the air. Then the giant bird moved further from the cave's entrance, settling down again not far from where it had been. The green energy still flowed and crackled around the rock, but nothing else seemed to be happening. Mishra was crestfallen. It was obvious that he expected to take care of the creature. Urza put a reassuring hand on Mishra's shoulder. "You had an effect on it, brother. It's just too massive to be taken down so easily." Takasia spoke up from behind them. "The Suchi are almost upon us." The rumbling of metallic footsteps added weight to her words. Urza turned to Mishra. "Brother, take Takasia straight to the ornithopter. Run." Mishra hesitated. "What about the rock?" Urza looked him directly in the eyes. "I'll handle it. Go." Takasia opened her mouth to object, but Mishra was already hauling her out of the cave's mouth. Urza was ahead of them, momentarily distracting the rock as he made a mad dash towards the broken spiders they had spotted when they found the cave. The rock followed, squawking a loud challenge as it dived after them. The distraction proved to be a success, as Mishra was able to safely get Tenebrous and himself to a secure hiding spot behind a large boulder. They weren't able to reach the ornithopter yet, but this was a good midway point to halt and see what Urza was doing. Mishra looked out from around the boulder. "What is taking that idiot so long?" he muttered. Tenebrous' voice was soft and half ragged from running her old bones across the desert. "Spiders." Whatever else she had been about to say was cut off abruptly by a large resonant humming sound. The sound was accompanied by a giant bronze spider. It surged forth from beneath the waves of sand. Sunlight glinted off of its metal carapace. The grandeur of it was diminished by how damaged the thing was. Half the spider's legs were gone, and giant holes had been torn all through the massive construct. Through one of these holes, Tenebrous and Mishra were able to spot Urza. He had one hand frenetically working the spider's controls, an array of buttons and levers. Mishra wondered to himself, where did he learn how to operate these? And then he noticed that Urza's other hand was clenched around his half of the stone. Around the stone, a red light glowed, and it flowed from the stone into the bronze spider. So that's how he got it working. Mishra had no more time to ponder, as the sound of metallic footsteps had reached the cave mouth. The remaining Su-Chi moved methodically out into the desert sands. Mishra felt his stomach sink. Urza would be quickly outnumbered, and that spider was an old wreck, while the oncoming Su-Chi looked sleek and new. The outcome was obvious. A loud screeching noise came from the spider as a metallic tube seemed to rotate towards the rock. The rock's primitive bird brain drove it onwards, intending to tear Urza out of the broken spider's casing as it dove headlong, loosing a terrifying screech. Urza bellowed something in challenge, but was drowned out by the sound of a calamitous fire blast, as pure fiery death spewed from the end of the metallic tube, crawling along the bird's giant form, setting every feather alight. Mishra had been told legends of mythical phoenixes, birds made of pure living fire, and for the briefest moment, the tale seemed to have come to life. The rock, a symbol of strength in the desert, resplendently wreathed in the flames of rebirth. That illusion was quickly shattered when the rock shrieked and dropped from the air, a flaming mass of flesh. As it happened, the rock landed directly on top of the oncoming Su-Chi, the sheer weight of the rock's body crushing them completely. Black smoke billowed into the air, but it wasn't from the rock. It was pouring out of the bronze spider. Flames crept up the sides of the construct as Urza ran for his life. A high-pitched whine cut the air, and then the bronze spider exploded, giant fragments flying through the air. A monumental wave of echoes bounced along the canyon walls. Urza, his face blackened with soot, clothing singed, staggered over to Mishra and Tenebrous. "Problem solved," he said. Mishra laughed. "Pure dumb luck." Tenebrous spoke up. "We have all been very lucky. Let's hope we're lucky enough to get back home in one piece." Mishra wasn't having it. "You were incredibly lucky, brother. That's all." Urza's eyes narrowed slightly. "Luck played no part in this, brother. I believed that I understood the spider's functioning and used my power in a quickly devised plan." Mishra snorted. "You had no clue. You made the Su-Chi stronger by accident. How do you think that I learned what the stone does, Mishra? You should try learning from your mistakes. After all, you make so many." Tenebrous attempted to intercede, but the boys were too heated. Mishra bellowed, "I destroyed those Su-Chi first!" Urza's face was twisted with anger. You're the one who caused the stone to shatter. Mishra took a step forward, glowering. I touched nothing. You did. Takesia pushed herself between the brothers, the strain of their escapades plain on her face. Enough. Settle this argument somewhere less dangerous. What if there are more rocks? But neither brother budged. Please, let's just go, she said. The brothers still paid her no heed, their eyes locked. Urza spoke into the silence. Hand it over. Mishra's eyes narrowed and he held his stone close to his chest as Urza continued. I want to see if we can fit them back together. Mishra's grip tightened on the stone, and fitful flickers of light played against his face. Then give me your stone, brother, and we can see if you're right. Urza's face was stern. I can't chance you breaking it. This was too much for Mishra. He raged. You're an obnoxious know-it-all who blames his failings on me. Urza's eyes were ice. I'm older and more experienced, so of course I know better than you. Well, clearly you aren't wise enough to see I won't let you take my stone, Urza. Prove your wisdom. Prove your theory, brother. Give me your stone. Urza's rage came blazing forth. Have it then, brother. Yet another thing you haven't earned. As he said this, Urza moved his hand forward viper quick. Takesia saw it all unfolding before her, but was powerless to stop it. Mishra had stepped forward, and Urza's fist, bearing his stone, slammed into Mishra's head. Mishra crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, blood leaking from a gash on his forehead. Immediately, Urza was overcome with guilt. He rushed forward, extending his hand to Mishra, trying to help him up. I'm sorry, brother. That was an accident. Mishra scuttled back. Stay away from me. Urza felt an angry tug on his shoulder. Takesia's face was a mask of rage. You are supposed to be the responsible elder brother. I always hear you saying you are. Look what you've done. Urza's face went white. He turned to Mishra. Brother, just shut up, Urza. I want nothing to do with you right now. Takesia attempted to soothe him. Mishra, save it. I don't need you involved in this. This is between us, and we each have our own stone, so things are fine. Takesia rolled her eyes and tried to get a grip on her anger. For all they had grown, the brothers were still children in some ways, and no amount of anger could change that. So she gave the boys tasks. Urza was dispatched to see to the ornithopter, while Mishra was sent off to make sure none of the Suchis had managed to avoid destruction when the flaming rock had crashed atop them. Even after these tasks had been taken care of, there was serious tension between Urza and Mishra. They barely spoke to each other, and only about serious subjects that were relevant to the situation at hand. Nothing was said about the thran, the power stones, or what happened in the cave. Takesia noted sadly that things would never be as they had been between the brothers, as they all made their way back to the safety of their encampment. Takesia was right. Mishra moved out of his shared accommodations with Urza, choosing to live in a tent among the Folly diggers. Interactions between the two became more caustic, with mealtimes being particularly contentious. They constantly undermined each other's work in front of others. After a month of arguments so heated that they made everyone in earshot uncomfortable, Urza abruptly stopped showing up for meals, choosing to eat alone instead. Mishra, however, continued to show up for meals, each day looking more and more unhappy, until after about a month, he started taking his meals in the Folly digger camp. Takesia attempted to mend the break between the brothers, but was met with an unyielding wall of civility. The boys were very polite, but simply would not talk about what happened at Koilos. Takesia suspected that somehow the stones were influencing the brothers, either as the source of their anger, or by drawing out the worst aspects of their latent sibling rivalry. Both brothers now wore the stones about their necks. Urza's dangled on a golden clasp, while Mishra's was secured in a leather bag on a string in the style popular with the Folly. Takesia wanted to study the stones, but ran into significant problems trying to do so. When she requested to examine his stone, Urza balked. He said he wanted to study it himself first, but Tekesia could see from his eyes that he was fearful she would let Mishra have the stone to study. For his part, Mishra reacted much the same. He seized on Urza's refusal as a reason to deny her request, and again, she saw the same fear in Mishra's eyes. The boys no longer trusted her as they had. It was maddening. She was left with no other option than to study the meager power stone she already had on hand. Unfortunately, that study led nowhere. The power stones she had to work with were small and weak. None of them possessed the wondrous power of the Brothers' stones. How was she supposed to help them? The problems in the camp extended out past the brothers in serious ways. Many of the Folly diggers were outraged and horrified that Tekesia and the brothers had violated the Thran's secret heart. Spitting curses, waves of Folly surged out of the camp, never to return. As news spread further into the desert, the supply of Thran artifacts that used to appear with regularity vanished on the winds. The desert had become more dangerous recently. Ancient tribes that lived quietly for years came roaring out of isolation in brazen raids, capturing merchant caravans, and even a few times they made it into the city of Argive itself. Tekesia's camp had always been left alone due to the presence of the Folly amongst them. That would change now. The desert nomads revered strength, and as a result, they followed whoever was strongest. Old Amal explained to Tekesia that the Sawardi were behind the raids into Argive, and the other clans had started to join them. The leader, otherwise known as a Kadir of the Sawardi, is stirring up the desert people, talking of the ancient glory and strength of the Folly. The nomads are tiring of seeing all these ancient Thran items leaving their homelands to be display pieces for rich nobility. Amal's voice was heavy. You must give up your plans of relocating to Koilos. The Sawardi have decreed that any trespassers forfeit their freedom. Amal could see her mind had shifted to something else. The boys? Tekesia murmured a response. They grow ever more quarrelsome. Amal rumbled. They are fire and ice, as like to burn away as to shatter. Mishra has spoken of his dreams. They are of pure blackness, a viscous, seductive darkness that croons to him, luring him towards it. He is terrified of it. Tekesia was thoughtful. He told you of his fear? Amal shook his head ruefully. One of my assistants, Hajar, is his friend. I heard it through him. Amal, do you think this may be happening because of the power stones? Amal was non-committal. Perhaps. Tekesia continued. Urza's stone empowers, while Mishra's disempowers. Urza has taken to calling them the Might Stone and Weak Stone. Mishra hates having his stone considered to be lesser, so he refuses to use these names, instead referring to them as Mishra's and Urza's stones. I don't know how to bring them back together. Amal sighed. The living change in ways we cannot control. He lifted his glass to her as he said it, and she joined him in drinking. The conversation turned to less serious matters, and after a time, Amal rose to leave, bidding Tekesia good night. As he stepped into the dark night air, the sky above him sparkled with the radiance of countless stars. His silent contemplations were interrupted by the sound of scuffing. Amal moved slowly, looking in the direction of the noise, ears straining for the slightest sound. He needn't have tried so hard, as a half-covered cough echoed out into the air a moment later. Come out now, or I'll raise the alarm. In response, a figure slipped out from the shadows. Amal was relieved to realize it was Hajar, his apprentice. Hajar smiled sheepishly. I had no luck trying to sleep, so I'm out for a stroll. Amal put a hand on Hajar's shoulder. Come, my young friend. Let us enjoy the walk back to our camp together. Hajar hesitated, and Amal could sense someone else was there. Did you accompany one of the girl students out for some late-night fun? Amal had seen this many times. These two would get harsh words. His thoughts were interrupted by the second figure stepping into the light. It was Mishra. Amal gave him a curious nod. Surprised to see you in this camp so late at night. I came to get something from my old room, and Hajar came along to keep me company. Mishra had moved closer, and Amal could smell waves of desert wine wafting from the man. Amal was surprised to be able to smell it, considering how much wine he drank with Tekesia. Mishra must have been drinking for hours. Amal could see the writing on the wall. Mishra had been at the wine all day to build up his courage to confront Urza. That's why he was here so late. Thinking quickly, Amal smiled at Mishra. Since you've brought Hajar as company, you have no real need for him. I have a task that requires his attention. Mishra gave a small smile that never reached his eyes. Of course, Amal. Amal guided Hajar away from Mishra, not looking back. Hopefully now that Mishra was alone, he would make the right choice and just go back to his tent. Once enough distance was put between them, Amal turned to Hajar. What is really happening here? Hajar looked away, unwilling to meet Amal's eyes. Amal fixed him with a flat look that Hajar swore he could feel was boring into his skin. Mishra is angry with Urza over being mocked and for trying to get his stone. Amal took the information in and thought back to the look in Mishra's eyes when he smiled that non-smile. Then his eyes widened, and he cursed. Hajar turned in surprise, but Amal was already talking. Go now, find Tekesia. She'll be sleeping in her favorite chair. Wake her, and tell her what's happened. Bring her as fast as you can. Hajar blinked somewhat stuperously, and Amal grabbed him. Go, boy, now, or you'll spend the next month digging ditches in the noonday sun. Hajar's eyes widened, much more alert, and he dashed off to fetch Tekesia. Amal hastened towards the home the brothers had shared for a big part of their lives. He could see lamplight in the windows and heard the brothers talking in the distance. Mishra's voice, that of an inebriated bear, Urza's, that of an acerbic wasp. Amal stopped about 10 feet away from the door, waiting for the arrival of Tekesia. As he stood there, light flared to life in multiple windows. The brothers' argument was waking the king. Tekesia appeared alongside Hajar, the latter disappearing immediately back out into the night to let everyone know that Urza and Mishra were finally facing off. Tekesia's eyes had the look of someone just roused unwelcomely from a deep sleep. Amal, is there a reason you've not stopped this foolishness? She finished with a yawn. This storm has been brewing. Let them fight it out. So far it's only been words. In direct contradiction to Amal's statement, at that very moment, something glass inside the cabin smashed to the ground. Tekesia moved towards the door, but Amal blocked her gently. Let them do this. It is a thing of young men. They will be sore and bruised, but no worse for the wear. In the end, this is for the best. Tekesia hesitated, and a crowd grew around the cabin. The voices intensified. Several loud thuds were heard, and then Amal noticed that the lamplight was behaving strangely. Why was it hues of red and green like that? It seemed so unnatural. His train of thought was interrupted by Tekesia, her voice full of fear. Dear gods, they're using the stones. They're using the thran stones against each other. Well, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this installment of the Brothers War lore. If you enjoy what we're doing here, then consider supporting the channel on Patreon or through channel memberships. Also, it's really helpful if you share the video around so more people can enjoy these stories. Thank you for coming by. I will see you for the next episode, my friends. And remember, lore is life.